heard my soul singing behind a leaf, plucked the leaf, but then I heard it singing behind a veil. I tore the veil, but then I heard it singing behind a wall. I broke the wall, and I heard my soul singing against me. I built up the wall, mended the curtain, but I could not put back the leaf. I held it in my hand, and I heard my soul singing mightily against me. That is what it's like to study without a friend. Any guesses? Leonard Cohen, 1984. Book of Mercy. I lost my way. I forgot to call on your name. The raw heart beat against the world, and the tears were for my lost victory. But you are here. You have always been here. The world is all forgetting, and the heart is a rage of directions. But your name unifies the heart, and the world is lifted into its place. Blessed is the one who waits in the traveler's heart for his turning. Poetry Show 26, I think. That's me, Gord, welcoming you once again. Organic fruit punch this time. Excuse me while I go get the next book. Edwin Arlington Robinson, an American poet whom you will find in all the anthologies and not what we'd call celebrated in the present day. But here's a poem of his about Erasmus. I know you're thinking, wait a minute, I know that name. Yes, when I was wandering around Oxford on one of my trips to England, looking for a place to sit down as the town was filled at lunchtime with many foreign language students taking up all the seats where I might have a coffee and a bun. I walked past a church and it said, Erasmus preached here in 1387. And I thought, do I feel like a speck of dirt on the back of a dog's ass? Oh. Europe's like that. Erasmus, when he protested, not too solemnly, that for a world's achieving maintenance, the crust of overdone divinity lacked aliment. They called it recreance. And when he chose through his own glass to scan thick Europe and reduced unyieldingly the monk within the cassock to the man within the monk, they called it heresy. And when he made so perilously bold as to be scattered forth in black and white, good fathers looked askance at him and rolled their inward eyes in anguish and affright. There were some of them did shake at what was told, and they shook best who knew that he was right. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, from a long time ago. So I bet you didn't know Marcel Proust wrote poems. You thought he just wrote that big long book that nobody, well, hardly anybody reads, but everyone likes to think they've read? Remembrance of things past. Well, he wrote poems too, and I just found out myself, so I can't really brag. And naturally, they're translated. I think he wrote them all his life and left them in notebooks and whatnot. And Penguin has kindly put out the collected poems. And from a selection called The Intermittences of the Heart. Let me read number 10. In that exquisite monastery's bright courtyard. Your charm is the courtyard of a pretty monastery, the sky sea blue through its white archways. Here it is good to spend the hot, sleepy days beneath a spindly column with a cool, silent drink. Tomorrow, I know too well, I will slink towards troubling palaces, alone in a daze. But today, your charm is my friend. The slow gaze of your mauve eye is all there is on earth, I think. In its slender whiteness, your brow does not conceal that infinite shadow from which light will spill. And yet, dear one, what a strange love I feel, when my heart no longer beats at your clear laugh. I will perhaps blush at the sweetness still that it would be to stay curled up in your heart, in that exquisite monastery's bright courtyard. From Portraits of Painters and Musicians. Chopin. Ocean of sighs, and just above the waves a flight of butterflies pauses. No, passes, circling above the melancholy sea. Dream, love, suffer, sleep it off, and between each throb of pain produce the sudden oblivion of your whim. Don't butterflies proceed from flower to flower? Thus your joy becomes your grief's accomplice. The whirlpool's thirst is only for more tears. Prince of Despair? A noble lord betrayed? The moon's pale companion and the seas, you still exult, the paler the handsomer, in the sun that floods your sick room, weeping at your smile and suffering at the sight. The smile is for regret, the tears for hope. What did I do? Oh. Mozart. You'll remember that name. Wolfie, as they said in the movie. Wolfie. Italian lady in the arms of a Bavarian knight, whose sad and chilly gaze rejoices in her lazy art. He holds her ripened breasts to his heart in the shade of his shivering gardens to feed on light. His tender German soul, such a deep sigh, tastes the ardent idleness of being loved at last. He hands the radiant hope of his charmed past to hands too feeble to lift it high. Cherubimo, Don Juan! Far from the fading oblivion, standing amid the aromas, he trampled so many flowers that the wind scattered without drying his tears, from the tombs of Tuscany to the Andalusian garden. In the German park, where troubles spread like vapor, the Italian lady is still queen of the night. Her breath makes the air there holy and delicate, and her enchanted flute drips with ardor, still warm in the shade. The farewells of a lovely day, the freshness of heaven, of kisses, of sorbet. Canadian poet Dennis Lee. Been writing for a long time. I think his first book was in 67, maybe 66. From his new and selected Night Watch. Not that new, but new enough. You too lie down. Over every elm the half-light hovers. Down you lie down too. Through every shade of dusk a husk impinges. Robins settle to the nest. Beneath, the deep earth breathes. It breathes. You too lie down. The drowsy room is close and come to darkness. Hush. You too can sleep at last. You too lie down. East of the moment. Somewhere east of the moment, the gist of a radiant here and now awaits its advent. It is not apocalypse, but in that ampler place, which is never fully extant, for it always flares in our lives and then gone again, in that saner place, and yet the image of where we live. Same job, same folk, same gritty streets and destinations. Somehow in that place the things of day to day coincide with themselves. They graze at the source. In their ordinary traffic they are permitted to move to a resonant measure, and a life-size radiance prevails. And not to dwell in that itch and intermittent glory. What needless diminution. A life-size radiance prevails. Thanks, Dennis. Oh, today's first jazz poem. American poet Mark Doty, from his volume My Alexandria, 1993. Almost Blue for Chet Baker. If Hart Crane played a trumpet, he'd sound like you, your horn's dark city miraculous and broken over and over. Scale shimmered, every harbour flung hour and salt span of cabled longing, every waterfront, the night lover's rendezvous. This is the entrance to the city of you, sleep's hell gate, and 2 weeks before the casual relinquishment of your hold, light needling on the canal's gleaming haze, and the buds blaring like horns, 2 weeks before the end, Chet, and you're playing like anything, singing, "Stay, little Valentine, stay." And taking so long that our world's sinking between the notes, this exhalation no longer a voice, but a rush of air, brutal from the tunnels under the river. The barge's late whistles you only hear when the traffic's stilled by snow. A city hushed and distilled into one rush of breath, yours, into the microphone, and the ear of that girl in the leopard print scarf. One long kiss begun on the highway and carried on dangerously, the Thunderbird veering on the coast road, glamour of a perfectly splayed fender, dazzling lipstick, a little pearl of junk, some stretch of road breathless and travelled into. Whoever she is, she's the other coast of you. And just beyond the bridge, the city's long amalgam of ardour and indifference is lit like a votive, then blown out. Too many rooms unrented in this residential hotel, and you don't want to know why they're making that noise in the hall. You're going to wake up in any one of how many 10,000 locations of trouble and longing. Going out of business forever, everything must go. Wake up and start wanting. It's so much better when you don't want. Nothing falls then, nothing lost but sleep, and who wanted that? In the pearl the suspended world is. In the warm suspension and glaze of this song, everything stays up, almost forever in the long glide, sung into the vein, one note held almost impossibly, almost blue, and the lyric takes so long to open. A little blood blooming. There's no love song finer. But how strange the change from major to minor every time we say goodbye. And you leaning into that warm haze from the window, Amsterdam, late afternoon glimmer, a blur of buds, breathing in the windows, and you let go. And why not? Ooh, nice one there, Mark. Whoa. We've read from young Jacob Scheier's poems before. Still looks kind of young to me. Anyway, this is his new book, Letter from Brooklyn. How appropriate, eh? I believe he's a Toronto poet. And why don't we read the actual poem, Letter from Brooklyn? I can already see how this will end. How I will grow tired of the bridge's steep incline and the absent-minded tourists wandering into the bicycle path. The weather will turn cold, but that all happens later. For now it is the early edge of fall. Leaves still green while the air narrows, it's slightly crisp, almost grazing the hair of my arm like a passing stranger, as though the air has been forced into intimacy by the brevity of daylight. But when it starts darkening at 4, this closeness, I know, will be a felt distance, like someone drawing your attention to their lack of intimacy. These days I am still walking at a cathedral pace beneath the branches bending across avenues, brownstones like rows of lived-in chapels, like a pop-up picture book I could have had as a child, but didn't. How Brooklyn makes me nostalgic for the moment I am walking inside of. These late afternoons filled with a loneliness that makes me feel distinctly myself, and an awareness of how rare that is. A little bit of politics now. The world-changing business. The world-changing business was the family business. My father took me to the storefront at the edge of history, saying, "One day this will all be yours." But our store was the world, and it wasn't supposed to belong to anyone, or it was supposed to belong to all of us. I didn't understand it either. For the world already was that way when I was a child, the way of owning nothing. I thought the business was to make us all children one day, yet childhood was disappointing. The first time my father said, "We are going to a demo," I expected to see wrecking balls spoon brick and stone, but people just stood, or walked, or spoke, sometimes of wrecking things, though no one ever did. My father often spoke about the world that could be, should be, would be. I was to inherit this business of not yet, and now, and always. We lived in the future I would build one day, though I wanted more, to be a garbage man. My father would have preferred that to what I am doing right now. Well, I think more from that another time. Thank you, Jacob. the Seamus Heaney Memorial is coming up. It's in preparation right now. Just for those of you who are wondering, why isn't he dedicating this to Seamus Heaney? Well, I'm working on it. Right now, I amuse myself by imagining I'm having a pint with Willie Yeats, and probably not discussing poetry. But you never know. When you're, jiving to the eternity of eternal life, perhaps poetry isn't your first thought. Although you never know, it might be. Margaret Avison, the fine Canadian poet of many, many years, who either may have passed or may not have passed, I'm not quite sure. Forgive me for that lapse. But I feel like she should be more celebrated than she is. Although you could say that about a lot of poets, except for the 10 ridiculously most famous poets in the 20th century. Everyone else doesn't get celebrated enough. From Winter Sun, 1960, a couple of poems. Butterfly Bones, sonnet against sonnets. An awful lot of sonnet making these last few years, and I'm not too sure all of it is really required. I mean, where's the next raft of villanelles, for example? Or just, free verse jumping about like children playing in puddles. I think we could do with a bit more of that. Anyway, here's Margaret from 1960-ish. The cyanide jar seals life as sonnets move toward final stiffness. Yea! Cased in a white glare, these specimens stare for peering boys to prove strange certainties. Plain dog sled and safari assure continuing range. The sweep net skill, the patience, learning, leave all living stranger. Insect or poem waits for the fix, the frill position can affect, brilliant with danger. What law and wonder the museum spectres bespeak is cryptic for the shivery wings. The world cut diamond-eyed, those eyes reflectors, or herbal grass, sunned motes fierce listening. Might sheened and rigid trophies strike men blind, like Adam's lexicon locked in the mind? They might indeed, Margaret. Hiatus. Indeed, hiatus. The weedy light through the uncurtained glass finds foreign space where the piano was, and mournful airs from the propped open door follow forlorn sheds of excelsior. Though the towel droops with sad significance, all else is gone. One last reviewing glance, one last misplacing finding of the key, and the last steps echo and fade and die. Then wanderer with 100 things to see to, scores of decisions waiting on your veto, or worse, being made at random till you come, so weeks will pass before you feel at home. Mover unmoved, how can you choose this hour to prowl at large around a hardware store? When you have purchased the superfluous wrench, you wander still, and watch the late sun drench the fruit stalls, pavements, shoppers, cars, as though all were invisible and safe but you. But in your mind's ear now resounds the din of friends who've come to help you settle in, and your thoughts fumble as you start the car on whether somebody marked the barrel where the glasses are. Party on, party on. Okay, winding along there. Early Billy Collins. Another famous name, 1998, from Picnic Lightning. I chop some parsley while listening to Art Blakey's version of Three Blind Mice. And I start wondering how they came to be blind. If it was congenital, they could be brothers and sisters. And I think of the poor mother brooding over her sightless young triplets. Or was it a common accident, all three caught in a searing explosion, a firework perhaps? If not, if each came to his or her blindness separately, how did they ever manage to find another one? Would it not be difficult for a blind mouse to locate even one fellow mouse with vision, let alone two other blind ones? And how, in their tiny darkness, could they possibly have run after a farmer's wife, or anyone else's wife for that matter? Not to mention why. Just so she could cut off their tails with a carving knife is the cynic's answer. But the thought of them without eyes, and now without tails to trail through the moist grass, or slip around the corner of a baseboard, has the cynic who always lounges within me, up off his couch and at the window, trying to hide the rising softness that he feels. By now I am on to dicing an onion, which might account for the wet stinging in my own eyes, though Freddie Hubbard's mournful trumpet on Blue Moon, which happens to be the next cut, cannot be said to be making matters any better. Fishing on the Susquehanna in July. I have never been fishing on the Susquehanna, or any other river for that matter, to be perfectly honest. Not in July or any month have I had the pleasure, if it is a pleasure, of fishing on the Susquehanna. I am more likely to be found in a quiet room, like this one. A painting of a woman on the wall, a bowl of tangerines on the table, trying to manufacture the sensation of fishing on the Susquehanna. There is little doubt that others have been fishing on the Susquehanna, rowing upstream in a wooden boat, sliding the oars under the water, then raising them to drip in the light. But the nearest I have ever come to fishing on the Susquehanna was one afternoon in the museum in Philadelphia, when I balanced a little egg of time in front of a painting in which that river curled around a bend under a blue cloud-ruffled sky, dense trees along the banks, and a fellow with a red bandana sitting in a small green flat-bottomed boat holding the thin whip of a pole. That is something I am likely ever to do, I remember saying to myself and the person next to me. Then I blinked and moved on to other American scenes of haystacks, water whitening over rocks, even one of a brown hare who seemed so wired with alertness I imagined him springing right out of the frame. Life and art, poets and words, rhythms, metaphors, the eternity of literature. Poets in this world, poets in the next world. Poets coming back after being in the next world for a while. The eternal river of time. And the endless geography of space. Well, from PoetryShow, have a happy October, friends around the world, poetry lovers, members of the Brotherhood of Man. Peace to you all.